Good morning, everyone. I think no matter what coastline you're on, we're still in the morning hours of the last Tuesday of the month, which is when I bring to you my podcast, Angie's Advice for Agents. And I just could not be more excited to have with us Carroll Golden with NAIFA, and she kind of gave you a little precursor of the other organization for limited and extended care. But wow, we have got a really hot topic, an exciting thing to talk to you about today. And we kind of always do a little bit of our research ahead of time. And Carol and I had a conversation last week about, how do we want to approach this? And Carol, I can't thank you enough for being on my podcast with me this month. It's very timely. It's this is a big deal. Like you mentioned, we're gonna talk about a lot of different things around extended care and long-term care planning, but something that's definitely on the tip of everybody's tongue. And regardless if you're in the state of Washington or you are working with clients or advisors in the state of Washington, believe you me, this is impacting you. I'm in Kansas and this is impacting me. And so, Carol, I want to thank you for that. I want you to also, if you would like to introduce yourself and kind of what you do and where you're seeing stuff. And then I think you and I'll go ahead and just kind of start our chatter.
Okay, first, Angie, I would like to mention to everyone that I'm not representing the opinion or position of NAIFA. We are still in talks with other organizations like ACLI and NAHU and other organizations that also are in the process of studying the whole issue. We also have created a legislative working group, and I want to thank you, Angie, for volunteering to be part of one of the subcommittees. Mm-hmm. So as everyone can guess, there are many organizations and many advisors and agents who are really delving into understanding both the pros and the cons of the Washington Cares Trust. At the present time, I am the executive director of NAIFA's Limited and Extended Care Planning Center, emphasis on the planning, or LECP, as we fondly call it. So that has given me access to being able to work with NAIFA's, they're 130 years old. Their advocacy is deep and well established. So today, though, I'm not speaking for NAIFA. I'm speaking like you as an agent. I'm a licensed agent. I have sold, I have been part of brokerages, and I have worked for 3 different insurance carriers. So like everyone listening, I am enthused, and at the same time, I'm trying to better understand what is a really good solution for our clients, for ourselves, for the carriers, and for the states.
Most certainly, Carol, I very well said, very well put. I think our position when we're going to be talking about this really isn't a position, right? We're kind of looking at this from every angle. And I think you and I can agree. There are some absolute definite pros to this. And maybe some unintentional things when we, if we do talk about, the cons of this, but man, what great awareness. I mean, has this not just kind of brought the whole conversation, no matter, are you happy about it? Are you mad about it? But it's really brought forth a conversation about what is this? Not what is the tax, but what is long-term care insurance? Why are we being talked to about this? Why is this a big deal? So talk about, a huge plus for our industry, bringing out education and awareness and all different types of solutions, and kudos for Washington for taking a step forward kind of really, I guess, we've always kind of wanted in our industry some kind of like a got milk campaign, right? Or, we've had a few things like that, but here we are. I mean, here I am in Kansas talking about Washington. I mean, it's touching everything. And I think really what we wanted to stress too, Carol, was you may not be in Washington, and maybe you're not even on the West Coast. Maybe you're clear out on the East Coast, but be ready, right? There's more to come to this. This isn't just limited to the state of Washington.
No, and I would venture to say that from the research we have done, we already have seen 11 different states moving in the direction. For example, I sat in on a committee discussion and listened to California discussing what should be our recommendations. They, of course, also are looking at the Washington Cares Trust because lessons learned, right?
Right.
So I think it's interesting. One of the things I did discover was not only is this, because it really taps the employer situation, they have put up, I would tell you, August 13th, the Employment Security Department issued a special edition of its employer newsletter, and in it, they dedicated it to the Washington Cares Trust, and that letter alone, or it goes out to about 125,000 businesses. And it was a recap of the plan. It, of course, directed them back to the website. But on the website, there was a dashboard, and there is, good information on some of the operational things that would concern employers and thus, consumers. For example, they mentioned that they had hired 88, and I'm quoting now, strong candidates for this fall's opt-out launch. They didn't define what a strong candidate was. They didn't indicate how many would be hired, but at least they are posting information so that you can really follow what they're doing. Well, so can the other 11 plus states now. So your point is well taken, Angie. If you're not living in the state of Washington, this is still going to be very good for our industry, because not only are other states saying, we need to look at this also, but from our particular state needs and situation, but because it throws out education and awareness, where, news articles that may have ignored extended or long-term care are now starting to say, well, the states are finally recognizing that the boomer generation, I saw this expression, it's not mine, has turned into the elder boom. So no longer baby boomers, they are considered elder boomers. And with that comes that enormous change that has come with generations. In my book, I went through the impacts on the Gen Xers, because as you know,
right,
the first one turned 40 in 2021. Same with the millennials. Everyone is caught up in the fact, I guess in a word, longevity. So,
well, and what I love about this, so the Washington Cares Fund is bringing out this awareness, whether we want to sit and say, oh, this is just horrible, it's you're strong arming the citizen, I mean, I've heard everything. I mean, some of the emails that have been forwarded to me from the consumers were not kind. They wanted to find the best way to opt out and things of that. But what it has really said, so, right, we know that the long-term care industry really, for the most part, does not get positive press. And we seem to be so hung up on rate increases and future rate increases. And the beauty of it is we have so many different solutions that are out there today. And the Washington Cares Fund actually allows for alternate solutions that are not just traditionally based. But what it's really doing is it's shedding a great big light on the fact that the states are concerned about their population, about their citizens, and how are we going to provide that care when there's not the funds, when they can't self-fund this? How do we do this? Is there a way for public and private to actually come together to make a really good solution that's meaningful? And I know that we've got both sides of the spectrum. We've got the purists at heart in the LTC space. We've got those that are just kind of, what I'll say, willy-nilly and, whatever the client wants, but I think, I think, Carroll, you've been so involved in a lot of the other organizations, not just with NAIFA, but the many associations that have their hands in this to try to come to a conclusion of, is there a place for public and private? Is it front loaded? Is it back loaded? There are so many things that are out there that as an industry, we're trying to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on. There was the WISH Act that was presented by the congressman out on Long Island. Then we've got the Washington Cares Fund that was put into place. We've got many other states looking to do this. So it is definitely bringing forward the idea. And so I think as agents and advisors to our clients, we would be doing a huge disservice if we didn't start implementing the conversation with our clients. We have wonderful solutions today. I think that we're going to continue to see the evolution of the long-term care product space and different things coming forward. But what a great way for us to get out and start having the conversation. And that's what I love, not getting into the details of what does the Washington Cares Fund Act provide, how long are you vesting into it, how much can you get in benefit? That's impactful to the citizens or the people actually earning income there, but it's really bringing awareness to our space. And I think all of us can agree that's a good thing.
One of the lessons learned from the traditional long-term care rate increases, Angie, speaks to what you're discussing. We learned that the one thing about not acting when you see that things are starting to become very difficult is that the problem just compounds. So you have to give states credit for saying, we recognize now that fiscally, this is not looking good for our citizens to have access to state funding without some sort of support. So the longer you don't recognize that the bulk of people who may need care is going to stress the system beyond repair, the worse the problem gets. So I agree with you that Washington State finally said, look, we're going to do something. And they have made adjustments along the way about what policies might qualify, which ones. Of course, one of the side effects was that not everybody who wants to own individual long-term care acted on it, as we know, as agents. It's something they postpone. So the good thing here is whether you're in the state of Washington as an agent or anywhere in the United States, you now have a new dialogue to discuss with the agent. Will it take something like what's happening in a state where they recognize we don't like what the future looks like fiscally if we don't do something here? most states are going to be in the same situation. Now is the time to look at all your different options and say, well, my agent can present me 2 or 3 different ways to even approach it. And as we go through those 2 or 3 different ways, I can explain my likes and dislikes. Well, hooray. Agents and advisors finally get to have a more robust discussion without it being a forced discussion. And I think that that is significantly different than what we had this time last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Carol, what I think is interesting is talking, so those are all the good things that it's doing for the industry and how that's impactful, really across the nation. Because when you're looking at those 11 plus states, this is not a regionalized situation. I mean, we've got West Coast, middle of the country to the East Coast. I mean, the states that are looking at something similar, and I hate to say it, but do you not see maybe somewhat of a monkey see, monkey do situation where we're saying, okay, well, that's what Washington did. We're going to do this, but we're going to change this, and we'll do this, but we might change this. So this is certainly not a regional situation. It's truly those 11 plus states are across the country. And so it's interesting to me that now would definitely be the time for us to get comfortable with the conversation. I mean, just bring up the conversation. And when we start to look at what's happened with Washington being not only impactful to that state, with carriers having to suspend sales in that state, we have seen quite a bit of operational unintentional consequences due to the Washington Cares Fund, which kind of brings a little bit of pause to me in thinking, okay, 11 plus states looking at doing something similar, all probably rolling out at different times. What's that going to look like to the industry from some of those, unintentional consequences that we've seen? I mean, we're getting emails from carriers now that say apps that would have taken us 45 to 60 days, it's going to take us 55 to 70 days to get through that. I mean, they've seen just an immense amount of applications coming in, and there's a hard and fast deadline for Washington. So does that mean if my Kansas app goes in, is it maybe going to get pushed back so that we can try to hit the deadline for a Washington app that's in-house? Those are some of the things that I've felt, unintentionally that has happened from the Washington Cares Fund.
Well, I think that that's a great point, Angie. And I think what we're hearing is this is an opportunity for states to say lessons learned. The operational challenges, whether Washington can alter, of course, it's a legislation issue, remains to be seen. But certainly they know that carriers did their best. But when you expect, 300 apps and you get 1,300 in that very same period, the concern is that it clogs it for all 50 states, as you mentioned, or whatever states that carrier happens to be in. So there's operational challenges, as you said. But the fact is that lessons learned that comes out of those challenges, think of the employers in the state. They are becoming a payment agent for the state. Are they prepared for that? How do they feel about that? So some of the challenges can lead to, I hate to say this, but more robust, better discussions between the private and public. There's no doubt that everybody would benefit from a private public program, but maybe Washington State has given us some insight into what are some of the, as you said, unexpected consequences that came out of the operational side of putting such a program in. And the same for some of our clients. What if you have a client who is living in Kansas, but is an employee in another state that is putting in a plan? Where does that leave them? Do they have to move to that state to access the benefit, although they have been paying in? And I mentioned generationally, I have heard from quite a few Gen Xers who say, I'm 40. If I don't retire until I'm 70, what does that look like? And I thought, well, hooray, they're finally starting, all consumers, all of our clients, to say, well, I guess this is something that's futuristic, but can affect me today. Again, it's a different conversation for us to have with our clients, because before they would say, I don't need to worry about this, it's in the future or whatever. Well, it got fast forwarded. And that's important for the carriers who are developing new programs and who are vested in, say, creating wellness programs to try to help people say, okay, I've now fast forwarded. COVID was a peek at what I really never want to see happen in the hospitals and in facilities. So how am I going to stay out of that? How am I going to deal now with the unknown 40 years hence? These are conversations we've tried very hard to at least bring up, and we've gotten shut down. So now a lot of the operational and, shall I say, actuarial challenges that we might be able to see in the program is very important for us as agents and advisors to say, what's in here that is important and resonates with my consumers in my states? How do we get ahead of this? Also, as I mentioned, first of all, Angie, I want to thank you for being a NAIFA member for so many years. And, as an advocacy arm, maybe you think about joining an organization that has grassroots before your state gets too far down the line. Participate, have information you can personally share with clients who live in your state, whether it's Colorado or Kansas or Texas, just so they understand that you're vested in understanding the problem, as well as helping them understand the problem and look at options that would work for them.
And, Carol, I think what's interesting, if we take a step back at kind of what our industry has seen as trying to bring a positive voice, a positive light into long-term care planning. We had Own Your Own Future campaigns that were at the state levels. We had the Class Act that never really got off the ground. We've got the Washington Cares Fund. We have the WISH Act being talked about. We've even got Senator Toomey talking about, trying to use 401k money without, taxation on those funds if they're used for, certain dollars amounts. So there's so much out there in the industry. And I agree with you 100% that it can become very overwhelming. If you are a resident agent in one state and it's not Washington at this time, you may think, that's interesting. But what's more interesting is if you were to actually take a step back and kind of dig into your state as to maybe what's the stance there, and go even, I've always said, if you're just a resource in your community, right? That means how engaged are you in your community and having these conversations, because that's where it's going to impact you. You may look at Washington and say, that's them, that's their situation, that's not mine. But this was a giant footprint in a step to bring awareness to extended care planning when we've actually had several things come forward. This one, however, yes, did it force the hand of the folks in Washington? Sure it did, right? You're either in or you're out. And if you're wanting out, you got to have something to opt out to meet those guidelines. And there's a deadline on that. Who's to say other dates are going to give such a long deadline? And how much burden does this put back on the employers? And what do the other situations, what are those going to look like? I think it's absolutely wonderful that we have so many major associations watching this very closely, having working legislative groups to have those conversations, because they do come back and ask folks like yourself and my peers in the industry, what do you think? What do you think is going to work? And it's important from not only, we think about what's best for the consumer, but we also have to understand what's good for the carrier as well. And like you said, that's probably why we saw those suspension of sales. You're getting inundated with so many applications, you'll never get them in and out the door in time, and causing such a backlog, if you will, on all the other business that is going in. And then you got the pandemic from last year that, quite frankly, really did increase sales for long-term care, which, so it's almost like when our hands are forced, we take action. And I say, we probably should start these conversations much sooner than that. And then that allows you to have the flexibility without the panic. And I think that's where I feel like we're at right now, just knowing that behind the scenes, you have got an enormous amount of people trying to do what's best for the industry and for the consumers. And when I say industry, I don't just mean insurance companies, but obviously at that consumer level, because it's got to be right for them as well. And that's really why we're in insurance, right? To do what's best for that consumer and to solve that problem. And long-term care is very real, whether or not we want to talk about what happens without the plan in place. It gives us something to very much talk about. And that's really what Washington has done for the rest of the country. And really what I wanted to bring forward is we shouldn't walk around thinking, well, that's a Washington state problem. There's plenty of other states that are watching and having conversations at this time that could become very impactful to you in your state. And just to speak to Carroll's terms, if you're not engaged in some of your grassroots or at your community or your state level, you might not even be aware that your state is one of them.
Too true. And, as far as being part of our communities, the Washington, also, as Washingtonians, they also included, if you go to that site that I mentioned, they also included what happens if you're a vet and you think you're covered for long-term care through vets benefits, or what if you're a federal employee? In the case of Washington, it doesn't cover federal employees unless it's the military department and it is considered a state employer. So there's all kinds of embedded consumer issues that some of our clients may think, well, I'm going to use veterans benefits. And are you really eligible? Is it going to exempt you from payroll tax? So I would agree with you. The same with the WISH Act. I think that there is this whole federal level that we haven't even really gotten into. What is it going to look like? Is it going to look a bit like the Class Act? Of course, it's a back end. Would that be more favored by certain states, consumers, carriers? We haven't really even looked at it because of the, I would say, the current impact that the Washington State's program is having. And, just knowing that their program has 3 ADLs, a lot of the focus is on at-home care because we know coming out of the pandemic that many of our clients, if you ask, and you will, when
Mhm.
you're saying, how are we going to look at options? They're probably going to be pretty open about, I'm not really anxious to go to a facility of any sort. I
Right.
would like to know how to age in place, which has become another buzzword. So I think, Angie, you get a lot of credit for saying, let me put a podcast together. Let me make sure that agents in the Midwest realize that some of the states like Minnesota
Mhm.
and Michigan are already well underway. I mean,
Mhm.
Minnesota has been a very participating state. Remember, they were the ones who started to talk about educating consumers and creating different programs so that their residents could better understand the issue. But you have Hawaii. I was looking at what they were doing, of course, California. So it's an opportunity for us as agents, advisors, carriers, states to grow. And same on the federal level with Swazi and his
Mhm.
federal program. Because the more we look at what works, and as you aptly pointed out, unintended consequences, the closer we'll get to putting something in place that at least the majority of people can support, feel good about. But for us, no matter what's put in place, we owe it to clients to be knowledgeable and to be positive. This is our opportunity. This is the time when we have to have a voice and when we have to say, okay, lessons learned. What is my state thinking? What can I do to help not only my clients, but to make sure, you're the experts. It's important that states hear what you have learned by who you are, whether you're selling traditional or hybrid or whatever you are selling.
Mhm.
It's important that they hear what works, what doesn't work, what's the reactions of consumers to different things, how entrenched are the employers in your state, in your business? Is there a worksite opportunity?
Mhm.
It's 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 very challenging, but things that are worthwhile often are very challenging.
Most certainly. And I think, we have to look at a challenge as an opportunity. You've got to find, if you will, the proverbial silver lining in what that opportunity is. I would almost say, as we think about how the Washington Cares Fund is rolling out, I don't even want to say how it's working, because it's honestly still a work in progress. No different than what the long-term care partnership program was when they started launching into that. But we need to think about how this could be impactful at our own state level. What is our state doing? Is your state actually looking at, is there conversations at your state level that maybe you're not aware of? And more importantly, what have you, as the advisor to your clients, what have you planned for your extended care needs? And I have to tell you, it just speaks volumes. Do you sell life insurance without owning it for yourself? So I think that's something that we need to consider for ourselves as well. If you believe in it, then we should own it. And whatever that solution is for you, but it does ring and speak loudly to your consumers that this is something that you do believe in. And it's kind of one of those things that I say, it's now it's a matter of time before it hits. And the more we learn and the more we educate ourselves, and like you said, Carol, the more we have a voice about this, the better we're going to be able to serve our clients and our customers. And that's really what this is about, is finding there's no cookie cutter solution for extended care planning. No two people need extended care needs exactly the same. So that's the beauty of the choices and the options that we have. And now what this is doing is just kind of giving us that nudge, right? Unless you're in the state of Washington, you're being shoved at this point. In your state, if you're not in Washington, you're getting a nudge And that's really what I wanted to bring forward in this podcast. I can't thank you enough, Carroll, for being my guest, kind of sharing with us and enlightening us with us what you're hearing, because you get to be in different conversations than maybe most of us do. It's so great to be able to connect and work with you again. And I want to thank you for that. And I hope this was informative. We didn't want to get in here and tear apart the Washington Cares Fund, going into detail. We really kind of wanted to talk to you about an overreaching industry perspective of kind of what we're seeing and how this is impactful. But of course, Carroll and I are always reachable. And Carroll, I want to thank you and ask if you had any closing comments.
I would say that I agree with what Angie has just said, the purpose, the impact, but I would say stay informed. Those of you who have tuned in to hear Angie's podcast, thank you, because it shows that you are expanding your knowledge, that you are willing to spend the time to become a better agent. Because, nowadays our consumers tend to be educated consumers, and they may come at you with a question. It's okay not to know the answer, but you need to know where to go to get the answers. So, Angie, I thank you so much for having me as a guest. I always enjoy spending any time that I can with you. And I thank all of those people who have tuned in for spending time with us this morning.
Awesome. Thank you, Carroll. Again, the next podcast will be the last Tuesday of every month. So we will see you in September. Thank you so much. Have a great day.